Hi there. In our last demo, I talked about printing using a reductive technique with a blue plate. And to make this a little bit more interesting, I think what I want to do is overprint it with the complement. So this was a slightly purpley blue, and opposite, if you think about opposites on the color wheel, those are the complements. And so I want to start with kind of an orangey yellow. So that should be right across the color wheel from kind of a purpley blue. So the red is going to overwhelm the yellow pretty quickly, so I want to make sure I've got a lot of yellow and just the tiniest bit of red so that it doesn't become a really strong red color. So let me grab a scrubbing that board. And I'm just going to barely touch down into the red and just add a dot at a time. So I want to make sure I'm not killing that yellow. Get most of that off of there, and I'll mix with the other end. So the goal is to kind of get a still mostly yellow, but a little bit leaning toward an orange. I'm going to kind of pick up this yellow that I had already spread out from the previous print and modify it with just a tiny bit of red to create a slightly orangey yellow. That looks pretty good. And off to the side. Before I touch my brayer, I'm going to kind of clean the ink off my fingers so I don't spread ink everywhere. This already had some yellow on it, but I think that's going to be fine. We're just going to kind of cover it with a slightly more orangey yellow. And we'll pull the print out of the way just for a while we get the plate inked up. Here's our plate. Go slightly more orange. This really does look quite yellow. The order that you print these colors can make a difference. So if you find that the yellow always gets overwhelmed by the reds and the blues, if you print the yellow on top of the other colors, it has a better chance of showing up. The other thing you can do is you can mix your, let's say you're going to be mixing a red and a yellow. The red has a tendency to overwhelm the yellow, so you might dilute the red with even more transparent base so that it's not quite so powerful, and it gives the yellow a little bit more chance to show through. So that's pretty yellow. I'm going to shift it a tiny bit more orangey and see what we can do here. So add in a little bit more red, mix it really well on the roller. Warms the yellow up a little bit more, slightly more orangey. It's a pretty good solid layer there. Now again, we'll work reductively, so if there's any areas that we want to make sure the blue shows through full strength, we can block those out now by lifting the yellow off of the plate in those areas. So again, maybe I'll do kind of a similar kind of random marks, a few little marks with the towel, and we'll do some skewer marks again too. Maybe a little bit more. Wipe it off occasionally so we don't get quite so many globs this time. And again, if you wanted to press textures into it or do anything else, this would be the time to do that. I also want to play around with putting some stencils on. So we'll put some stencils on just like we did the first time that are just nice clean stencils that don't have any ink on them. But I also want to play around with laying some of our used stencils down. So these are some stencils that I pulled off of the blue plate that still have wet blue ink on them. So I'm going to try to put those back in. I'm trying to remember where I had them on the last one so I don't duplicate it too much, but we'll lay this on, and I'm hoping that some of this blue transfers down onto the print instead of just using a pure area that would just completely block the ink. We're going to actually be using these stencils to add some more ink in certain areas, so let's see how that looks. It's going to be blue ink over blue ink, so it'll go a little bit darker in those areas. Okay, I think that's fine for experimental purposes. It's not, again, going to be particularly amazing image, but give you an idea of how this works. So we're putting our little window frame over the ink to kind of protect the borders of the paper from getting ink on them. And let's go ahead and lay our paper down. So I want to make sure the plate's as much in the same spot as it was the last time. And I think I'm going to kind of turn this since we had the shape at the bottom last time, it looks like. So I'm just doing my best to try to get the image in the same spot over the plate. This is going to be a little bit of just a guessing game here, but alright, let's go ahead and just press that on there. And I'll put my burnishing paper back over that. This is freezer paper, or sorry, it's parchment paper. And then I'll spend 2 or 3 minutes just burnishing again with the wooden spoon. So I'll do that off camera and I'll come right back. Alright, I'm back. I've spent about 3 minutes just burnishing this really carefully. I'm ready to remove the parchment paper buffer and peel this back and see what we've got. Alright, let me pull this out of the way. So the areas I'm trying to see if some of these areas where we had these shapes that transferred the ink or not. It's a little bit hard to tell. I'm going to find this shape here. Okay, so this shape is that one. And then this shape was over here. Yeah, I think because the blue is printing over blue areas, it's a little more subtle than it might otherwise be if we had a different color on there that would show up. But it did add a little bit more texture to those areas to make them a little bit more interesting. So we've mixed some complements. I don't know if I had quite true complements. We ended up with a little bit of a greenish tone there, but it's definitely a neutralized tone in the areas where the two colors mixed. So that's a way to reduce the vibrancy of some of your colors. If you feel like everything's kind of shockingly bright and vibrant, you can intentionally overprint some of the complements of those colors. So those would be the colors that are opposite the color on the color wheel, to help neutralize and tone some areas down so that not everything is equally vibrant. So again, I don't feel like this is necessarily a very interesting resolved image, but there might be little parts of it that I can use later to cut out and glue onto other prints using the sheen collé technique. So do save these and document your progress on your experimentation. For the early prints, I'm not expecting a lot of very necessarily resolved imagery, but what I want to see is a lot of experimentation and getting the widest range of colors and textures and values that you can. So that's what I'll be looking for, is a wide range of values and a nice variety of textures so that not everything feels like it was created with the same tool or the same color ink.